What if the greatest king in the history of Middle-earth had reached out his hand and taken the one thing he was wise enough to refuse? What would the world look like in the keeping of a man who had spent 87 years preparing to save it? And at what point does the love of a king for his people become indistinguishable from the will of a god over his creation? Today on Tangwar Archives, we put our scholarship and our imagination into answering one of the legendarium's most consequential questions. What if Aragorn had taken the One Ring? We begin not at the moment of divergence, but 1 year before it. Rivendell, the 25th of October, 3rd Age 3018. The Council of Elrond. The eastern courtyard of Elrond's house is open to the morning, stone seats arranged in a half-circle on a porch that catches the first light coming off the misty mountains in long flat bars, light that falls across carved pillars and pale ancient faces with the specific impartiality of morning light, which illuminates grief and composure equally, and distinguishes between them not at all. The smell is pine resin and rain-wet granite, and the particular cold of a high valley in October, a cold that does not acknowledge the season's turn and never has. Around the central seats sit beings who carry, between them, more accumulated grief than any single war has ever produced. Elves who watched Beleriand drown, a dwarf whose people lost a mountain. Hobbits who do not yet understand what they are sitting among them, Aragorn, son of Arathorn. He is not silent. This is important to understand precisely. He is not the man at the table's edge, watching while others speak. He has spoken already, has spoken the things that needed saying, with the directness of a man who has had 87 years to decide how to say them. He revealed himself to Boromir when Boromir's doubt required answering, drew the shards of Narsil from his sheath in the clear October light, and laid them on the stone where they could be seen by men who needed to believe in what they could see, and said what he was. He pledged. He will pledge again before the morning is out, when Frodo accepts the burden. He means it completely. And yet beneath the speaking, beneath the precise, deliberate public performance of a man enacting exactly what is required of him at this hour, there is something very still. It is not absence. It is the specific, practiced stillness of a man who has learned, across 8 decades of ranging, to carry two things simultaneously: what the situation requires, and what he has concluded about the situation. These do not always align in other men. In Aragorn, they align completely, and the alignment is the stillness, the complete, unsurprising coincidence of what he says with what he believes. He concluded this before he arrived. The council is confirming what he settled in private. The confirmation costs him nothing additional, because the cost was paid months ago in the long interior work of arriving at a position and finding it solid. He watches as well as he speaks. His eyes move from face to face with the patient, clinical sweep of a tracker reading a landscape. Boromir is speaking. He is making the argument again, the argument he has made twice already. Each time in slightly different language, as though the problem is translation rather than philosophy. Why cannot the ring be used? He does not say it this way. He says it in the language of strategy, of desperate necessity, of Gondor's southern walls and the armies assembling beyond them. But the question underneath every version is the same. Why not? Gandalf answers. Then Elrond. Then Galadriel, through the architecture of what she does not say. Each answer arrives at the same place. The ring does not serve. It converts. It takes the hand that holds it and reshapes the hand, slowly, until the hand is indistinguishable from the object it believes it is directing. The bearer becomes, degree by degree, the ring's instrument, not through force, not through cruelty, but through the patient amplification of the bearer's deepest desire, until the desire is the only thing remaining. Aragorn listens to this explanation. The narrator's eye, the camera of this story, holds on his face during the explanation, not on the speakers, on the listener, on the precise, barely visible quality of thought that moves behind his eyes, as Gandalf describes the mechanism by which the ring corrupts, and Elrond confirms the history of every attempt to use it for good, and the council's conclusion assembles itself with the cold completeness of a mathematical proof. They are talking about small men. He does not say this. He is a king's son, trained to the discipline of a king, and kings do not say the thing that would confirm what others are already afraid of in them. But the thought exists, clean, certain, entirely without arrogance in the way he experiences it, because it is not arrogance to observe a fact. Boromir reaches for the ring as a soldier reaches for a superior weapon. Faramir would reach for it as a scholar reaches for a dangerous text. These are men of courage and quality. They are not the heir of Isildur. They are not the line of Elros Tar Minyatur, the blood of Arendil, the concentrated remainder of a grace that Menrir was given and lost and that runs in him still, undiluted, 87 years refined by the specific endurance of a life that would have destroyed anyone who did not have the lineage to sustain it. He does not say this. He nods, with the council, when Frodo accepts the burden. He speaks, briefly, his pledge of protection. He means it completely. In his chamber that night, by the light of a single lamp burning low, he opens the journal he has kept since his 21st year. Cramped, secretive handwriting, the hand of a man accustomed to writing things he could not afford to have read. He has been keeping notes on the route, on Sauron's dispositions, on the Fellowship's composition and the vulnerabilities of each member. The last entry, written before the council, reads in the plain script of a man recording a conclusion he has fully reached. The ring must be destroyed. There is no other way. He believed it when he wrote it. He closes the journal. He sets it on the table beside the lamp. He does not read the entry again. He goes to the window and looks south, toward the dark distance of a world that needs what only he was built to give it. The thought he did not speak in council is still there. It is a very quiet thought. It is also very certain. These two qualities, the quietness and the certainty, are not in tension. They have never been in tension in Aragorn. They are the same thing. The journal lies on the table in the lamp's light. The ink is dry. No one reads it again. The date is February 26, Third Age 3019. The Hill of Sight, Amon Hen, at the southern tip of the lake Nen Hithoel. The air at the summit of Amon Hen carries the cold of altitude and moving water and the specific, thin quality of high places that have been old enough to accumulate significance. A quality of witness duration that stone holds differently than wood, that open sky holds differently than either. The seat of seeing is Gondorian work, old stone, placed by kings long gone, worn smooth on its surfaces by the hands of 100 vigilant men who sat here and watched an age turn. Below, the Anduin moves south. The forest on both banks is winter bare, the gray latticework of leafless trees stretching to the horizon in every direction. Frodo Baggins stands before Aragorn with his palm open. The ring lies in it. Small, warm gold, with a warmth that has no business existing in February on a cold hill in a cold country. It catches the flat morning light and holds it differently than it should. Not reflecting, exactly, but presenting the light back in a form that feels more considered than light usually is. It sits in a hobbit's palm, and it is very small, and it has been, since the fire of Orodruin, the largest thing in the world. Frodo's face is the face of a man who has carried something further than his body was made to carry it, and has arrived, at last, at someone who was built for carrying. There is relief in it. There is terror. There is the specific quality of a creature handing over a weight and not being certain, even now, that the handover is right, but being more certain of this than of continuing alone. You do it, the face says, without saying anything. You are the king. You are built for this. I am not. Aragorn looks at the ring. He looks at it for 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds he does not waver, does not deliberate, does not perform the hesitation that a man performing wisdom would perform. He has been thinking about this for 8 decades. The thinking is done. He reaches out his hand. He does not hesitate. Not because he is not afraid. Because he has spent his entire life practicing the art of not being afraid, and he has become very, very good at it. And this, the moment fear would have been wisdom, is the moment the practice fails him. The Uruk Hai of Isengard were not bred for complexity. This is not a criticism. It is an engineering specification. Saruman had spent a decade refining their design toward a single principle, the elimination of the gap between impulse and action. Ordinary orcs hesitated. They feared sunlight, feared certain enemies, feared the ancient racial memory of elvish voices speaking words in old languages that their bodies recognized before their minds could process. Saruman's Uruks were designed to be without this gap, to take the signal of command and translate it, without friction, into the event the command described. They were the most efficient soldiers in Middle-earth at the moment of their deployment. What they were efficient at was wanting and then doing, and the doing was always violence, and the want was always provided by someone else. The Uruk captain carries the want for all of them on this February morning. He has the scent, he has the orders. He has 200 soldiers built from the same principles as himself, fanning through the winter forest of Emyn Muil with the specific, organized quality of a search that has been conducted before and knows its own method. The Uruk the narrator follows has no name. It has a bite wound on the inside of its left hand, self-inflicted, during the march. From the leather strap it chews when the gap between now and the next sanctioned act of violence becomes too long to endure without some form of occupation. The strap is old leather, dark with use. It chews it with the rhythmic patience of a creature that has learned to manage itself during intervals of inaction. The chewing is the closest thing it has to a private habit. It is not aware that it is a habit. It is aware only that the chewing is present when the wanting has no immediate outlet, and that this is simply the condition of the interval between wantings. It is running. The trees are gray and bare, the floor of the forest uneven with frost-hardened roots and the residue of old rain. It runs with the particular efficiency of a body built for this, low center of gravity, wide chest, the ground-eating stride of something that does not tire on terrain that would exhaust a horse. Ahead of it, the sound of the forest changing, the crack of a branch displaced by something larger than wind, the specific silence that falls in a wood when something of consequence has entered it. Man smell, iron and sweat and something beneath both, something older, something the Uruks' designed senses do not have a category for, because the category would require a context the Uruk does not possess. It processes the something older as a variant of man's smell and files it accordingly and keeps running, because the want is clear and the direction is clear, and these are the only navigational tools it requires. Then the something older is very close. The Uruk does not slow. Slowing is not in its immediate vocabulary. What happens is subtler and more total, the thought that was running ahead of it. The thought that said kill, break, drag, run, the thought that was the engine of the morning's entire enterprise, simply is not there. Not suppressed, not interrupted, not blocked by a counter-instruction or a fear response, or any of the mechanisms by which a more complex mind manages the traffic of its own cognition. The thought is absent in the way that a fire is absent after it has been extinguished, leaving no smoke, no warmth, no residual shape in the air where the shape of the fire was. Just the absence where the thought had been. The Uruk stops. It does not decide to stop. Deciding requires the machinery of preference, and preference requires the simultaneous existence of at least two options. And there is only one option available now, which is stillness. Because the thought that animated movement is gone, and movement without the thought is simply falling. It stands in the frozen leaf litter of Amon Hen's lower slope, and it is very still, and the other Uruks around it, in their ones and twos through the gray wood, are also very still. Because the thought was not a private thought. It was the shared architecture of all of them, provided by the captain, originating with Saruman, and what has displaced it in all of them simultaneously, the way a wave displaces water. Completely, without negotiation, across the entire surface it touches. The absence has a quality. This is the thing the Uruk cannot process, and cannot not process. The absence is not empty. It carries something that is not a thought, and not an instruction, and not a want. It is closer to the experience of a space that has been organized, of a room that has been put in order after a long disorder, where the organization is not announced and not explained, but simply exists as a new fact about the room. The want that had been the central fact of the Uruk's cognition has been replaced by something that is not a want, and the replacement feels in some register of perception the Uruk has never previously used, correct, as though the want had been wrong, and the wrongness had been corrected, and this was simply how things were now. The Uruks stand in the winter wood. They wait. They do not know what they are waiting for, because waiting for is a structure that requires a content, and the content has been removed. They wait the way a hall waits, available, organized, without agenda. The forest is quiet around them. The frost on the roots catches the morning light at low angles, each crystal holding its own small cold fire. Somewhere south of them, on the Anduin, a bird calls once and does not call again. Aragorn walks past them. He does not walk through them dramatically, does not part them like a tide, does not issue commands, does not deploy the ring's authority as though it were a sword requiring a swing. He simply walks, at the pace of a man who knows where he is going and has accounted for everything between here and there. He passes within arm's reach of the nameless Uruk. The Uruk's eyes track him, not with hostility, not with the hunting focus that would, 20 seconds ago, have preceded a charge. With the particular neutral attention of something that has been recategorized. He is not a target. He is not an ally. He is the fact around which the Uruk's current existence is organized. the way a compass needle is organized around north, not because the needle was instructed to point north, but because north is simply what the needle points to, because that is what needles are for, and this is simply what the morning is for now. He does not look at the Uruk as he passes. He does not need to. He is thinking about Boromir. He is thinking about the boats on the shore and the fellowship coming apart, and the specific sequenced series of decisions that need to be made in the next 4 hours. He is thinking about Merry and Pippin, and the tactical question of extraction versus pursuit. Both hobbits are alive. He knows this with the ring's clear certainty. Shaken and terrified in the frozen underbrush a quarter-mile north where the leaderless Uruks passed without seeing them. He is thinking, with the clean and total clarity of a mind that has just had an enormous doubt permanently resolved, about what comes next. And what comes next is everything, and everything is, for the first time in his life, within reach. Behind him, the nameless Uruk stands in the frost. The leather strap falls from its left hand when the hand relaxes. It has been holding the strap without knowing it was holding the strap, a habit without a holder, a comfort that required no comfort, because the wanting that produced anxiety was gone, and the anxiety with it, and the strap that managed the anxiety with both. It falls through the cold air and lands in the leaf litter at the base of an ancient root without sound. It lies there in the gray morning. Dark leather, worn thin at the bite point, shaped by years of the specific pressure of teeth that no longer need it. Small, ugly in the way that objects defined entirely by their function are ugly when the function has been removed. The frost will take it before spring. The forest will cover it before summer. It is the most honest object in the scene, all the wanting dropped in the leaves. The Rohirrim are a people built from movement. This is not a metaphor. It is the foundational architectural fact of everything they are, their songs, their governance, their theology, their relationship to grief. Their particular form of courage that is not the courage of walls and sieges, but the courage of the open plain, where the horizon is always visible and the decision to ride toward it is made fresh each morning. The Rohirrim do not build monuments. They name horses. They do not write long histories. They compose riding songs that preserve, in the rhythm of the verse itself, in the beat that falls like hooves, the memory of what was done and by whom and at what cost. They are a people for whom motion is not a means to an end. It is the end. The riding is the point. The wind and the grass, and the particular quality of courage that belongs to people who know that the next valley might contain their death and choose the next valley anyway. Edoras sits on its hill above the Rittermark like a crown above a face. The hall of Meduseld catches the morning sun and returns it as gold, not the warm domestic gold of a hearth, but the specific ancient gold of a thing that was built to be seen from a long distance by people who needed to know where home was. The city is not large. It was never designed for permanence in the way that stone cities are designed for permanence. It was designed for visibility, for the reassurance of a fixed point in a landscape that is otherwise all grass and wind and the shifting light of a sky that changes its mind 6 times before noon. Aragorn arrives in the second week after Amon Hen, with the Fellowship's survivors and the specific quality of a man who has already decided everything that needs deciding and is now engaged in the administrative work of execution. The journey south has not been slow. The ring lends purpose to distance the way it lends everything else, a particular clarifying efficiency. But the Rittermark is wide, and the roads between the forest's edge and Edoras' hill do not shorten themselves for kings, not yet. He does not arrive as a conqueror. He arrives as a physician, because this is what Edoras requires, and he perceives what things require with the same clear, ring-amplified accuracy with which he perceived the Uruks' want and displaced it. Théoden's court is ill. Specifically, precisely ill, in the way that a body is ill when something foreign has been introduced at its center and has been allowed to operate there long enough to reshape the body's own processes around its presence. Gríma Wormtongue is the illness. It is not a subtle diagnosis. The ring makes it as legible as a wound. What follows in the Hall of Meduseld is not a confrontation. Confrontation implies a contest between parties of comparable standing, and Gríma Wormtongue, for all the genuine sophistication of his long campaign of corrosion, is not comparable in standing to what walks into Théoden's hall on this morning. His power was always the power of the gap, the space between what Théoden knew and what Théoden feared, into which Gríma poured his preferred content, slowly, patiently, with the particular skill of a man who has learned that the most durable form of control is the kind that the controlled person believes is their own thinking. The gap closes the moment Aragorn enters the hall. Gríma feels it before he can identify it, a change in the hall's quality, the way a room's quality changes when its largest source of light is supplemented by a larger one. His tools are the tools of negative space, implication, doubt, the strategic placement of almost truths in the fertile ground of a king's uncertainty. He has no instrument for a room that has no uncertainty in it. He looks at Aragorn and his silver tongue finds, for the first time in his career of careful words, nothing to do. There is no gap, there is no uncertainty to fill. He is a lockpick in the presence of a door with no lock, and the specific cold quality of his irrelevance arrives in his awareness before his mind has finished processing the scene. He leaves, not because he is expelled. Aragorn does not expel him, does not address him, does not deploy the ring's authority against him as though he were a problem requiring a solution. Gríma simply finds, in the hall's new atmosphere, that remaining is a form of self-exposure too complete to endure. He goes to his room. He sits. He begins composing, in his head, a letter to Saruman that he will ultimately not send, because sending it would require riding out of Edoras, and riding out of Edoras would require passing through the gate, and the gate is now something he cannot bring himself to approach. He stays in his room for 11 days. Then he rides north in the dark, because the dark is the only condition in which the gate feels passable. He is not stopped. He is not pursued. He is simply no longer relevant to the geometry of the hall. Théoden's recovery takes 4 days. Aragorn does not heal him the way he heals the wounded, does not place hands on a fever or call a spirit back from the margin of death. What Théoden needs is not that. What Théoden needs is for the long campaign of manufactured despair to encounter a counter-reality too large and too genuine to be maintained in its presence. Aragorn sits with him. He talks, not with the ring's compulsion, not with the particular force that displaced the Uruks or made Gríma's absence feel inevitable, but with his own genuine voice, his own genuine history. The 87 years of watching the world diminish and choosing, each morning, to believe that what he was walking toward was worth the walking. Théoden listens. And then, on the 4th day, Théoden stands. The Rohirrim muster. This is the moment the narrator's eye holds. Not the muster as logistics, not the count of horses, or the organization of ords, or the precise number of spears that can be fielded from the Riddermark's current population. The muster as experience. The specific quality of a people who have been told, by the accumulated weight of Gríma's long campaign, that the riding was over. That the world had contracted to the point where the wide plains were no longer safe, and the wind was no longer a promise, and the charge that their blood remembered was a memory rather than a future. And then Aragorn, and the muster, and the realization that it was not over. Omer rides at the column's head, his sister at his side, and the sound of 6,000 horses on the Riddermark's morning grass is the sound of a people remembering that they are built for this. It is very loud. It moves across the plain the way thunder moves, not simply heard but felt, through the soles of the feet, through the chest, through the specific bones that have been absorbing the rhythm of hoofbeats since childhood. They ride. They ride with the genuine exhilaration of a people restored to their nature, and Aragorn watches them from the ridge above Edoras with the particular satisfaction of a physician watching a patient stand for the first time after a long illness, and what he sees fills him with genuine love, and the love is genuine, and the ring hears the love and amplifies it. And the amplification is very quiet and very total, and it is already, though he does not know it yet, beginning. He watches them ride and he thinks, they will never need to fight again. Not as a threat, as a gift. The most sincere, the most loving, the most completely Aragorn thought he has had since Amon Hen. The Rohirrim ride across the morning plain, and they are magnificent, and they are free, and they are, though none of them know it, riding toward the last moment of freedom they will ever have. The last morning in which their movement is their own, their direction chosen, their purpose self-authored. After this morning, they will always be protected. Below the ridge, a young rider, perhaps 16, perhaps younger, pulls briefly ahead of the column in the exuberance of the first gallop, and her horse stretches into its full stride, and the plain opens up ahead of her in the flat, limitless way that the plain opens when the column is behind you and the horizon is ahead, and there is nothing between you and the horizon but speed and the Particular quality of joy that the Rohirrim have no word for because they have never needed one, because the experience was always simply available, like breathing. She pulls back into formation before anyone corrects her. No one corrects her, not today. Today, they ride. Corendil, son of Talvor, has held the position of King's Herald for 11 years. He inherited it from his father, who inherited it from his father's father, in the specific way that certain offices in Gondor are inherited. Not through law, exactly. Not through the formal mechanisms of appointment and confirmation that govern military rank and civic position, but through the accumulated weight of precedent, which in Gondor is heavier than law because it is older. The heralds of Minas Tirith predate the current administrative architecture of the city by several centuries. They predate several kings. They have outlasted constitutional crises, sieges, periods of regency, and the long interregnum in which the thrones stood empty and the stewards governed in its waiting shadow. The office persists because the office is the memory. Because someone must stand in the Great Hall and recite the lineage and confirm the law and speak the names in the correct order, or the city does not know who it is. Corendil knows what he is. He is the memory-made voice. He has understood this since his father explained it to him at age 9, standing in the anteroom of the Great Hall while the then current steward received an ambassador from Dol Amroth. And the explanation was not a lesson in civics but something closer to a theological statement. We are the record that speaks itself. When we speak correctly, the law is confirmed. When the law is confirmed, Gondor knows what it is. This is why we practice. He has practiced for 40 years. The full coronation recitation, the lineage, the titles, the formal confirmation of the law's satisfaction runs to 317 words in the Old Tongue, and he can deliver it in any condition, standing, sitting, in darkness. In the presence of foreign dignitaries whose evaluation of Gondor's ceremonial precision he is aware of and does not permit himself to be affected by. He has delivered portions of it at funerals, at the annual memorial of the last king's departure, at the private observances that the steward's house kept during the interregnum as a form of institutional memory maintenance. He has never delivered it complete, because delivering it complete requires a king, and there has been no king. Until now. The coronation of Elisar Telcontar, king of the reunited kingdom of Arnor and Gondor, takes place on the 1st day of May, 3rd Age 3019, on the field before the gate of Minas Tirith, in the presence of representatives of every free people of Middle-earth who can reach the city within the time available. The morning is clear. The Pelennor fields, which should have been a battlefield and were not, which the armies of Mordor evacuated before the engagement, scattered by a force that was not military, are green with early summer grass, the kind of green that appears in Gondor's southern latitude within weeks of winter's ending, a specific, almost aggressive green that the soldiers watching from the walls will remember. For the rest of their lives, as the color of the morning the king came home. Corendil stands at the ceremony's center in the robes of his office, formal gray, the herald's chain, the staff of carved bone that is older than he is and heavier than it looks, and he waits. The waiting is familiar. He has been waiting, in the ceremonial sense, for 40 years. When the moment comes, he breathes once, evenly, and begins. Behold, one has come to claim the kingship again at last. The words fill the field the way the words of a trained voice fill a space when the space has been waiting for them, completely, without effort, finding the edges of the silence and occupying them with the precision of something that was made for exactly this volume and exactly this purpose. He continues. The titles, the honors, the epithets that carry, in their accumulated weight, the full history of the lineage they describe. Here is Aragorn, son of Arathorn, chieftain of the Nadain of Arnor, captain of the host of the west, bearer of the star of the north, wielder of the sword reforged, victorious in battle whose hands bring healing, he reaches the place where the recitation should end. The place his father marked for him in the manuscript with a double line in red ink. Here the law is satisfied. Here you stop. He does not stop. Later, he will not be able to explain this with any precision that satisfies him. He will attempt the explanation many times, in the privacy of the anteroom, rehearsing it the way he rehearses the recitation, looking for the error. The place where his discipline failed, the specific weakness that produced the specific result. He will not find it. What happened was not a failure of discipline. It was the opposite. It was 40 years of discipline encountering the moment it had been built for, and discovering that the moment had no after. The recitation continues. The lineage, backward, Valindil son of Isildur. Isildur, son of Elendil. Elendil of Enmenor. The kings of Enmenor in their order, each name carrying the specific weight of a world that drowned. Tar-Palantir, Argymilsur. The long succession of diminishment and betrayal and stubborn fidelity. The line thinning and thinning until it narrowed to Elendil and his sons, and the ships that escaped the drowning with the seedling of the white tree and the shards of a sword that would not be, reforged for 3,000 years. Tar-Minestir. Tar-Aldarion. Tar-Meneldur. The early kings, the bright ones, the kings of Enmenor before the shadow came, whose names carry, even in their syllables, the specific quality of a time when the gift of men was understood as a gift and not resented as a limitation. Tar-Elendil. Vardamir and Limon. Elros Tar-Miniatur himself, the first king, twin brother to Elrond, who chose mortality at the dawn of the world, and whose choice is the root of everything that has grown from it across 6,000 years, including the man standing before Corendil now, wearing the ring. His throat begins to bleed somewhere around the 30th generation. Not dramatically, a small warmth at the back of the palate, the copper salt taste of a capillary that has been asked to sustain pressure it was not designed to sustain indefinitely. He registers it the way a craftsman registers a tool beginning to show strain, as information, not as a reason to stop. He does not stop. The words do not require his will to continue. This is the thing he will return to. In his later attempts at explanation, by the time his throat began to bleed, the recitation was no longer something he was doing. It was something he was participating in, the way a river participates in its own flow, present, necessary, but not the source of the motion. The law was speaking itself through him. He was the instrument. He had always been the instrument. The only difference was that before this morning, the instrument had always been silenced before the full performance, because the full performance required a king. Now there was a king. Now the performance could complete. And completion, it turned out, was not the same as stopping. Aragorn raises his hand, gentle, sovereign, the gesture of a man who is accustomed to stopping things without force. Corendil stops. The silence that follows is the specific silence of a crowd that has witnessed something it does not have a category for. Corendil bows. He walks from the field to the anteroom with the measured pace of his office, and he sits in the chair beside the narrow window. And he takes the cup of water that a page has left on the small table and he drinks it, and the water is very cold and the taste of blood recedes. And he sits with the empty cup in his hands and looks at the far wall of the anteroom and tries to find the next thing. The next thing is not there. He opens the formal record book. 11 years of his own entries above this page, and his father's handwriting above those, and his grandfather's above those, the continuous, dense record of every ceremony performed, every lineage confirmed, every name presented to the court, going back further than he has ever counted. All of it building toward this. All of it in service of the day the king came home and the law was fulfilled. He picks up the pen. He holds it above the blank page. He sits with the pen above the blankness for a long time, in the gray afternoon light of the anteroom, while the celebration continues outside, while the city discovers the specific quality of joy that belongs to a people who have been told their whole lives that something was coming, and have lived long enough to see it arrive. The entry that should be written here is the most important entry in the book's history. It is also the last entry the book requires. After this, there is no unfulfilled law. There is no absent king. There is no need for the record to continue, because the record was always a record of waiting, and the waiting is done. He sets the pen down. He closes the book. The blank page is very white in the gray afternoon light. All the other entries above it, dense with the work of incompleteness, dense with the record of a law that knew what it was waiting for, and waited with extraordinary patience across the full span of human lifetimes. And then this, the white space where the completion should be recorded, unmarked. Because the completion has no further requirement, and the instrument that was built to serve the requirement has, in the moment of the requirement's satisfaction, discovered that satisfaction and purpose are not the same thing. He will come back tomorrow. He will open the book again. He will pick up the pen. The page will still be blank. He does not know this yet. He sits in the anteroom with the closed book and the empty cup, and outside the window the city is very loud with its happiness, and he is very quiet inside it. And the quiet has no name, because he has never needed a name for it before. Denethor II has never been wrong about a man. This is not vanity. It is the record. 35 years of the stewardship, and in those years a complete, unblemished history of accurate assessment. Every ambassador whose surface cordiality concealed an ulterior agenda, perceived and filed before the formal greeting was finished. Every captain whose reported courage was administrative inflation rather than field fact, identified and reassigned before the inflated report cost lives. Every lord of the southern fiefs who arrived at Minas Tirith believing that proximity to the steward's person was equivalent to influence over the steward's decisions, disabused of this belief within the first hour of their first audience, gently, without drama, in a way that left them unable to identify the specific moment their misconception was corrected. He has not been wrong about a man in 35 years. He has been wrong about the Palantir. He knows this now, with the particular cold precision of a man who has spent 3 decades trusting an instrument and has recently discovered that the instrument was also being used by another hand. The stone showed him true things. This is the specific horror of what Sauron did not fabricate, did not manufacture false images, but selected, curated, showed Denethor the true things that would produce the most useful despair, the armies assembling in the east, the fleets from the south, the walls of Minas Tirith as they would look against that tide. All true, all accurate, and arranged with the patience of a will that has operated across millennia to produce a specific conclusion in the mind of the man watching. He sits in the high hall with the draped Palantir in its locked chest across the room, and he does not look at it, and he knows, with the same accuracy that identified the ambassador's hidden agenda and the captain's inflated courage, exactly what it has been doing to him for 17 years. He is not destroyed by this knowledge. He is clarified by it. This is the thing about Denethor, that his enemies, and he has enemies, because a man of his precise intelligence accumulates them the way a sharp edge accumulates contact, have never understood. His despair was never weakness. It was the logical conclusion of accurate information, and now that the information source has been exposed as curated, the despair has nowhere to stand. It was built on a foundation that has been removed. He is, on the morning Aragorn enters Minas Tirith, perhaps the clearest-minded he has been in 17 years. This is the cruelty of the timing. He has never been more capable of meeting what is coming. Aragorn does not come through the gate after a battle. There is no battle. The host of Mordor, which had assembled on the eastern bank of the Anduin with the organizational coherence of an army that has been preparing for a specific engagement for months, encountered the ring's reach sometime in the dark before dawn and lost. In that encounter, the coherent signal around which its organization was structured. Denethor watches from the Tower of Ecthelion as the eastern bank's fires go out, not extinguished, not scattered by a counterforce, but simply abandoned, the way fires are abandoned when the people tending them have somewhere else to be. Except there is nowhere else to be. They are simply standing in the dark beside fires they are no longer tending, facing west with the specific quality of attention that creatures give to something very large that they cannot yet see. The river crossing begins at first light, not an assault, a procession. The armies of the west, with Aragorn at their center, moving across the Anduin's fords with the unhurried certainty of a force that has already accounted for the resistance and found it absent. Denethor descends from the tower. He does this deliberately, because the alternative is to remain in the tower and watch through the Palantir, the draped, locked Palantir, and that is not something he will do again. He descends the stairs of Ecthelion with the pace of a man who has decided something and is now enacting the decision, and he crosses the upper courtyard in the gray morning light and enters the throne room through the eastern door and stands before the high seat that has been empty for nearly 1,000 years. He looks at it for a long time. The high seat is not impressive in the way that power usually presents itself as impressive. It is very old stone, worn at the arms by the hands of kings who died so long ago that their names require scholarly footnotes in the administrative records that Denethor maintains. It has a quality that old stone acquires when it has been significant for long enough: a density, a fairness, a presence that has nothing to do with size and everything to do with duration. It has been waiting. Everything in this room has been waiting. The waiting is the room's primary function and its primary quality. And Denethor, who has spent 35 years administering the waiting on behalf of an institution whose entire purpose was the waiting, stands before it and understands, with the clean precision of a man who has just run out of something he has been spending his entire life, that the waiting is over. He does not hear Aragorn enter. He hears, instead, the quality of the room change. the specific, barely perceptible shift in atmosphere that a very large presence produces when it crosses a threshold, not a sound, but a pressure. The way weather changes before the weather arrives. He does not turn immediately. He finishes his assessment of the high seat first. Because he is Denethor and he finishes what he is doing before he responds to interruption, and this is not stubbornness but the discipline of a man whose accuracy has always depended on completing his observations before allowing new data to complicate them. Then he turns. He has been preparing for this assessment for 35 years, in the sense that every steward since the throne emptied has been preparing for it, maintaining the realm, holding the walls, spending the sons and soldiers and treasury of Gondor against the long attrition of the shadow, against the day when the preparation would be justified by arrival. He has seen Aragorn before, in the Palantir's selective showing, in reports from Rohan, in the account of the Council of Elrond that reached him through channels he maintains specifically for information that does not come through official dispatch. He has formed a view. He reviews the view now, in the first seconds of direct observation, the way he reviews any prior assessment when the primary source becomes available. The view requires revision, not because his prior information was wrong, because information and presence are different categories of data, and what stands in the throne room doorway is not a category of data that Denethor's 35 years of governance have produced an instrument for. He has assessed powerful men. He has assessed men of Menrayan blood, men of the Nadain remnant, men whose lineage gave them a quality of bearing that ordinary men register as authority without being able to identify its source. He has assessed all of these things and found in each case the gap, the place where the presentation exceeded the substance, or the substance exceeded its own self-awareness, or the power was genuine but bounded, operating within a range that his own intelligence could measure and therefore manage. There is no gap, not in the way there is usually no gap, which is to say a gap too small or too well concealed for casual observation. The gap is simply not a feature of what he is looking at. Aragorn stands in the doorway of the throne room, and the ring on his finger is not visible at this distance, and does not need to be, because what it does to the man who wears it is not an addition to his existing qualities, but an amplification of them to a magnitude that changes their category. Denethor has spent 35 years assessing men within a specific range of human power. What stands in his doorway is outside the range, not supernatural, not divine, not the quality of elvish presence that he has encountered and filed under its own category. Human, entirely, specifically human, and therefore accessible by human instruments. And the assessment, completed in the first 3 seconds of observation with the full weight of 35 years of practice, arrives at a conclusion that Denethor has not arrived at in 35 years of assessments. He cannot find the measure of it. His logic does not fail. His intelligence does not fail. What fails, quietly, without drama, in the space between one breath and the next, is the premise on which the logic has always operated, that there is a measure, that the measure is within his range, that his range is sufficient for the object under assessment. He looks at Aragorn and his mind reaches for its instruments, and the instruments are present and functional, and they simply do not have the necessary scale. He walks to the steward's chair. He does this without deciding to do it, which is the most significant thing about the action. Denethor has not done anything without deciding to do it in 35 years. The walk to the chair is the body enacting what the mind has concluded before the mind has finished drawing the conclusion. He reaches the chair. He sits. The chair receives him with the specific worn familiarity of a thing that has held him for 3 decades and knows his weight. Then he stands. He stands because sitting is an assertion of position, and he is no longer certain his position is what it was 3 minutes ago, and Denethor does not assert uncertain positions. He stands and steps backward, and the shadow of the hall's great pillar falls across him as he steps into it, and he does not come out. He is there for a day and a night and another day. Food is brought. He eats it. He does not speak to the people who bring it, because speaking would require deciding what to say, and deciding what to say requires a position from which to speak. And he is not yet certain of his position, and he will not speak from uncertainty. The certainty will return. He is Denethor. The certainty has always returned. He is waiting for it. In the small room in the Tower of Ecthelion where they eventually house him, comfortable, well-appointed, filled with the books he requests and the materials for the marginalia he writes in them, observations on administrative decisions that accumulate in the margins of histories and governance treatises with the neat, compulsive density of a mind that has not stopped working and has nowhere to send its work, he does not touch the palantir. The palantir remains in its locked chest across the room. He knows, with the complete and unambiguous clarity of a man who has recovered his precision, that he does not need it anymore. That is not a comfort. The dead men of Dunharrow have been waiting for nearly 3,000 years. This is not a figure of speech. It is the precise canonical duration of their specific form of suffering, the interval between the oath and its performance, between the promise made to Isildur on the stone of Eric and the morning on the paths of the dead when Aragorn speaks their release. Nearly 3,000 years of the weight of an unperformed promise, which in Tolkien's metaphysics is not an abstraction but a physical condition. The oath presses on the spirit the way water presses on a submerged body, constant, omnidirectional, and patient in the specific way that only pressures which do not require effort are patient. The oath does not tire of pressing. It simply presses. They haunt the White Mountains because the White Mountains are where they died. This is also not a figure of speech. The haunting is not chosen. They are not selecting the mountain passes as a residence because the acoustics suit them or the darkness is convenient. They are where they are because the place of oath-breaking and the place of death have fused, in the long centuries of their waiting, into a single location that is simultaneously geographical and spiritual. They cannot leave it. More precisely, leaving would require an act of will directed away from the weight, and the weight is always heavier than the will to move, because the will diminishes over centuries, and the weight does not. They are not evil. This is the thing the terrified men of Rohan who have avoided the Dimholt road for generations do not understand. And it is the thing Aragorn understands immediately when he enters the paths of the dead, and the dark closes around him and the cold of the place reaches him in the way that the cold of places inhabited by the dead reaches the living, from inside rather than from outside. A cold that has nothing to do with temperature. He understands it through the ring's clear sight, which shows him what things are rather than how they present. They are not evil. They are people who made a promise and broke it and have been living in the breakage ever since, and what they want, what they have wanted for nearly 3,000 years, is to put the promise back together. He gives them that. The battle they fight at Pelargir, sweeping the corsairs from the southern harbor with the specific, decisive efficiency of a force that cannot be harmed and does not tire, is the fastest military engagement in the Third Age's recorded history. The corsairs of Umbar, a fleet of 42 ships, experienced raiders, men who have spent careers in the specific form of courage that belongs to people who fight on the water and have learned to trust the deck's motion under their feet as others trust solid ground, encounter the dead men of Dunharrow, and the encounter is not a battle in any sense the corsairs have training for. Their weapons pass through what they are swung at. Their opponents do not have the physical architecture that makes a sword effective. The corsairs understand very quickly that the tactical situation does not have a solution within their available toolkit, and the understanding produces, in the most experienced among them, not terror but the specific quiet of professional men, acknowledging that this particular job is outside their professional capacity. The harbor is taken in 4 hours. The fleet is taken intact. Aragorn stands on the harbor's stone quay in the gray morning and looks at the assembled dead and says what he came to say: "You are released from your oath. Go, and be at peace." It is not a performance. It is not the formal language of ceremony or the deliberate gravity of a king establishing precedent. He says it simply, with the particular directness of a man who has spent 87 years speaking to people in the field rather than in halls, who has learned that clarity is more respectful than eloquence. He means it completely. He looks at them and he sees, through the ring's sight, what he has always seen in the things he loves, the correct state of them, buried under whatever the world has done to obscure it. The correct state of the dead men is rest. He offers them the path to it. The dead pause. This is the moment the narrator holds, not the release, not the dispersal, not the long peace that should follow from the oath's completion and the king's word freely given. The pause. The moment between Aragorn's offer and the dead men's response, which lasts perhaps 3 seconds and contains, in those 3 seconds, a quality that Aragorn does not have the instrument to read. He does not read it. He sees men who should be released, and he releases them, and he has already moved on to the next problem. The fleet, the Anduin, the timing of the relief at Minas Tirith, before the pause has fully finished resolving. 3 of the dead men disperse in the first seconds after his words, then 5 more, then a dozen. The release is real, the word of the heir of Isildur, given freely, is sufficient to lift the oath's weight, and the weight lifting is experienced by those who feel it as what it is, the end of a pressure that has been the central fact of their existence for longer than the current age of the world has been current. They go. 47 do not because they cannot. The oath is lifted. The mechanism of their remaining has been removed. They could go, with the others, into whatever rest the dead go to when their unfinished business is finished. But Aragorn, in the moment before his words fully completed, had looked at them with the ring's amplified sight, had perceived with the accuracy that the ring gives to everything it touches, their particular quality of obedience, their particular capacity for sustained and unquestioning purpose, the specific and extraordinary value of a force that cannot be harmed and cannot be exhausted, and requires no supply line and no sleep and no wages, and the ring had felt him perceive it, and the ring had added to the thought its own quiet arithmetic. He does not say stay. He does not alter the terms of the release or rescind the offer or issue a counter-command that overrides the liberation he has just spoken. What he does is smaller and more total than any of these. He looks at the 47 who have not yet gone, and he names them. He gives them, one by one, a purpose. The silent wardens of the realm, guardians of the passes, keepers of the mountain roads. He speaks this not as an order but as a recognition, as though the role already existed and he is simply identifying who was always meant to fill it. He speaks it in the old tongue, the language of Menor, the language in which oaths were first sworn in this part of the world, and the language receives his words the way old languages receive the correct use of them, with a weight that newer words do not carry, a weight that has been accumulating since the first time these words were used for this purpose. The 47 do not go. They stand at the gate of the harbor in the gray morning, and they are very still, and they have a new name and a new purpose, and the purpose is real and genuinely useful, and it was given by the legitimate king with the ring of power on his finger, and the purpose fills the space that the oath's completion should have emptied, and they cannot tell. In the way that spirits who have been defined by an obligation for nearly 3,000 years cannot tell, whether what they are experiencing is freedom or its replacement. They stand. They are good at standing. They will stand at the gates of Gondor's roads and passes forever, or until something large enough to countermand a king's word releases them, and nothing is large enough. Because the king will not release them. Because the king loves his realm, and loving his realm means protecting it, and protecting it means keeping what cannot be harmed between his people and the things that could harm them. The citizens of Minas Tirith learn to hold their breath when they pass through the main gate, not because they are told to. Because the cold is different there, a cold that is not weather, that does not change with the season, that belongs to the wardens and their long patience, and the specific quality of a presence that has been waiting for longer than the city has been a city. Children dare each other to walk through with their eyes closed. Old men take the long way around. A woman who sells dried figs near the gatehouse moves her cart 3 feet farther in, then 6 feet, then around the corner, over the course of a month, without making a decision to do so. The gate is very safe. The wardens are very still. In the passes of the White Mountains, where the Dimholt Road runs through the shadow of the mountain's haunted reputation. A shepherd who has grazed his flock on these slopes for 30 years notices, one autumn morning, that he can use the road again. The darkness that has lived there since before his father's time is gone, or not gone, exactly, but changed in quality. The road is safe. He walks his flock through it and arrives at the lower pasture in better time than he has managed in years, and the flock is calm, and the morning is clear, and he should feel relieved. He does not feel relieved. He feels instead that the mountain has been given new management, that something has been assigned to these passes rather than simply haunting them, and that the something is attentive, and that the attention is not unkind, and that it is also not interested in him specifically. And that the combination of being noticed and not specifically noticed as an individual is a more uncomfortable form of surveillance than the old unspecific terror ever was. He moves his flock through the pass quickly. He does not stop for lunch as he usually does at the stone where the road bends east. He comes back the same way in the afternoon and does not stop then either. The road is safe. He will use it again. He will always use it again, because it is the fastest route to the lower pasture, and the wardens do not trouble him, and the pass is safe, and Gondor is protected. He simply walks through it faster than he used to. He tells himself this is habit. He is not wrong. It becomes habit very quickly. He has been walking through that pass for 30 years. And the body remembers what the mind has decided to set aside. and what the body remembers is older than the warden's, and will not be reasoned into a different pace. At the gate of Minas Tirith, in the cold that is not weather, the 47 stand. They have been standing here since the release that was not a release, in the service of a purpose that filled the space the oath's completion should have emptied, and they are neither at rest nor at work in any sense they were designed to understand. They are simply kept. Barad-dûr was not built to be taken from the inside. This is the foundational architectural fact of the Dark Tower, the principle from which every other principle of its construction derives. The threat has always been assumed to be external. The walls face outward. The defenses are oriented toward the plain of Gorgoroth and the passes that approach it and the sky above both. Because everything that could threaten Barad-dûr has always been outside Barad-dûr, and the inside has always been the source of the threat that everything else faced. The tower was built as a weapon pointed at the world. It was never designed to withstand a weapon pointed at itself. Aragorn does not assault it. The distinction matters and must be held precisely. What happens at Barad-dûr in the weeks after Pelargir is not a siege and not a battle and not a military engagement of any category that the strategic records of either Gondor or Mordor have a notation for. The armies of the west move through the Morannon, which opens, as the gate of Minas Tirith's outer defenses opened. Not from force, but from recognition. The same mechanism by which a lock opens to its correct key, not broken, simply correctly addressed, and they move across the plain of Gorgoroth with the specific quality of a procession rather than an invasion, because there is nothing to invade. The orcs of Mordor do not organize a defense. They are not routed. They simply find, as the Uruks of Amon Hen found, that the thought which preceded their violence, the want, the direction, the signal that told them what they were and what to do about it, is no longer present. They stand in the ash and the red light of Orodruin's ambient glow, and they wait, and the armies of the west move past them, and the movement is very orderly. Sauron is aware of all of this. The specific quality of his awareness is important for understanding what follows, and the lore architecture requires precision here. Sauron is not simply watching through the eye. He is experiencing what Aragorn is doing the way a body experiences the movement of its own blood, from the inside through the ring, which is not separate from him, but is him. The externalized portion of his will that he poured into the gold at Orodruin, and which has been the center of his existence ever since. The ring is on Aragorn's finger. This means that everything the ring is doing, everything it is amplifying, every use to which the power he placed in it is being put, Sauron feels it. Not as information, as sensation. As the experience of watching your own hand move in a direction you did not tell it to move, doing things you did not instruct it to do, with a facility that could only exist because the hand is yours. He has been feeling this since Amon Hen. He has had weeks to process it. The processing has been the most sustained intellectual effort of his very long existence. And he has not reached a conclusion that satisfies him, because the situation does not have a conclusion available within his existing framework. The framework was built on a premise: the ring returns to me, the ring serves me, the ring's power is my power directed by my will, that Aragorn's existence has made structurally unsound. Sauron cannot think his way out of the situation, because the situation is the substrate on which his thinking occurs. What he can do is reach. Through the ring, through the connection that was always bidirectional, he designed it to be bidirectional. Because control requires feedback, requires the ability to sense what the instrument is doing in the world, he reaches toward Aragorn. Not with the Palantir's channel, which Aragorn has already demonstrated he can close. Through the ring itself. Through the gold on the man's finger, which is his gold, his making, his will-made material, and which responds to his reaching the way a nerve responds to a signal from the brain that owns it. Aragorn feels it as a pressure at the base of his thoughts. Not painful, Sauron is not trying to hurt him, because hurting the bearer of the ring while the bearer wears it would require directing the ring's power against itself, which is not something the ring's architecture permits. What Sauron is doing is older and more sophisticated than pain. He is attempting to speak, to make his presence felt in the specific, intimate way that a will operating through an object makes its presence felt in the will operating through the same object, not as a voice, not as a vision, but as a quality of the thinking itself, a slight inflection of direction, a barely perceptible tendency in the thought's current. He is trying to remind the ring what it is. What it is in Sauron's framework, the framework he spent the entire Second Age constructing and the Third Age maintaining, is an expression of his will, not a tool, not a separate object with its own existence that happens to carry his power. An expression. The distinction is theological and it matters. Tools can be redirected, repurposed, used by other hands for other ends. Expressions of will cannot. An expression of will is not separate from the will that expresses it. When Sauron reaches through the ring and tries to make Aragorn feel the ring as an expression of Sauron's will, he is trying to collapse the distance between what the ring is doing in Aragorn's hand and what the ring was made to do in his. He is trying to remind the ring that it is homesick. For 3 weeks, in the march across Gorgoroth and the approach to Barad-dûr's outer walls, this pressure is present at the base of Aragorn's thinking. He does not address it directly, he does not turn toward it or engage with it or try to counter it through an act of will, because engaging with it would give it a surface to press against, and surfaces are what pressures require. He simply continues to be what he is, the heir of Isildur, the line of Elros, 87 years of practice not being afraid, and the pressure finds, in the substrate of his thinking, the same thing the Uruks want found in the forest: nowhere to land. The ring does not feel homesick. The ring has found a frequency so compatible with its own nature that the difference between its maker's will and its current bearer's will is not experienced by the ring as a difference worth crossing toward. Sauron built the ring to respond to a will sufficiently vast and ordered to direct it. He did not build it to distinguish between his vastness and another vastness of equal or greater magnitude. He could not have. He did not believe another such vastness existed. He was wrong. Aragorn reaches Barad-dûr on a morning of low cloud and ash-gray light, the kind of light that Mordor produces when Orodruin is between active periods, a diffuse, sourceless illumination that makes the landscape look like a drawing rather than a place, every edge clean and flat and slightly unreal. The tower stands on its hill above the plain of Gorgoroth, and it is very large and very old, and it carries in its stone the specific quality of architecture that was built by a will that intended it to be permanent. It was meant to last. It was meant to be the last thing standing, the final monument of the final domination, the proof in stone that the effort was worth the cost. He does not assault it. He stands before it, and he is what he is, and the ring on his finger reaches into the tower's foundations the way a root reaches into soil, not by force, not by the dramatic exertion of a will against a resistance, but by the patient, inevitable penetration of something that has found its medium and is simply moving through it. Barad-dûr was built with the ring's principles of construction embedded in every stone, every joint, every carefully calculated load-bearing element of its design. The ring knows the tower from the inside. It knows where every decision was made, and what logic produced it, and what the correct frequency is to address each element at. The foundations do not crack, the walls do not fall. The eye, which has been burning above the tower since the Second Age, in the specific sleepless way of a will that cannot afford to stop looking, goes dark. Not extinguished. Contained, Sauron's contraction into the ring is not dramatic and not instantaneous, and not something that has a single moment that could be identified afterward as the moment it happened. It is a process, the same process by which the ring has always operated, the slow and patient and geological pressure of a dominant frequency making a lesser frequency align with it. Sauron is not lesser. He is, by most available measures, among the greatest surviving beings in the history of Arda. But the measure that matters, the frequency of the ring, which he himself set, which he cannot change because changing it would require changing what he is at a level deeper than his current coherence extends, favors Aragorn, and the favoring is total, and the totality is patient. And patience does not require Aragorn to do anything at all. He simply stands before Barad-dûr and continues to be what he is. Sauron contracts. This is the most precise word available. Not destroyed, not killed, not dispersed in the way that fire disperses smoke, but pulled inward, the reach he extended through the ring's channel retracted by the channel's own operation. The frequency that was his will, encountering the frequency that the ring has settled into and finding, in that encounter not resistance but absorption. He contracts into the ring the way a reflection contracts into the surface that produces it when the light source moves. He is there, in the gold, in the warmth of the metal on Aragorn's finger, in the specific, ancient, inescapable fact of his own making, which now contains him rather than serves him, which is the one contingency he never designed for, because designing for it would have required imagining his own defeat, And Sauron, who can imagine almost everything, has never been able to imagine that. The tower above the plain of Gorgoroth stands exactly as it stood before. The walls are intact. The architecture is sound. The decisions in stone that Sauron's will made across the long centuries of its construction are still present in every fitted joint and calculated angle, readable by the ring's sight as clearly as they were when they were made. The eye does not return. The ash plain of Gorgoroth, in the first silence it has known since the Second Age, carries the specific quality of a room in which a very loud, constant sound has finally stopped. A quality that is experienced not as the presence of silence, but as the absence of noise, which are not the same thing, and the body notices the difference before the mind has processed it. A single stream of lava on Ord Ruin's southwest flank, flowing since before the armies of the west crossed the Morannon, small enough that no tactical assessment has noted it, too geological for the ring's sovereign attention to have addressed directly, slows. The cooling is not dramatic. It is the cooling of a substance that is lost. In the ambient change of the plane's conditions, the specific environmental temperature that was sustaining its flow. It slows. It stops. It hardens in the shape it occupied at the moment of stopping, irregular, unintentional, the shape of arrested motion rather than intended form. From a certain angle, in the flat ash-gray light of a Mordor morning, it looks like a clenched hand. No one notes this. No one is looking at it. The armies of the West are looking at the tower, and the tower is intact, and the eye is gone, and the king stands before the gate of the Dark Lord's fortress, on a morning of low cloud, and the war is over. The clenched hand of black rock on the slope of the cooling mountain will be there forever. It was not made. It was simply what happened when everything stopped, and stopping left it in that shape, and nothing will move it. It is very permanent. So is everything else now, Galadriel feels at first. This is not surprising. She has been feeling the ring since Amon Hen, since the moment it was claimed, which she perceived through Nenya the way you perceive a change in water pressure when a valve opens somewhere far upstream, not the event itself, but its consequence. Arriving along the connected system before the information of the event has traveled through any conventional channel. She felt it then as a shift. A new frequency in the architecture of ring lore, distant but decisive, the way a ship's navigator feels a current change through the hull before the instruments confirm it. What she feels now is different. The shift at Amon Hen was a change in who held the ring. What arrives in Lothlorraine on the morning after Barad-dûr is a change in what the ring is doing. A distinction that Galadriel, who has carried Nenya for nearly 5,000 years, and has therefore spent nearly 5,000 years thinking about the relationship between rings and the wills that direct them, perceives immediately and completely. The ring has not simply found a new bearer. It has settled. It has found a frequency compatible with its own nature, and has stopped the search that has been its primary activity since Isildur took it from Sauron's hand 3,000 years ago. It is no longer moving toward anything. It has arrived. And Nenya, resonating with it through the connection that was always present, the harmonic relationship between the three and the one that Celebrimbor built into the three without intending to. Because the one's principles of construction were the principles Sauron taught them, and you cannot build with a principle without the principle being present in what you build, Nenya responds. Not by breaking, not by failing, by amplifying. The golden wood of Lothlorien on the morning after Barad-dûr is more itself than it has ever been. This is the only language available for the experience. And it is inadequate, but it is what there is. The Malern trees more gold, the light through their leaves more the specific quality of light that Lothlorien light has always been. The air more the air of a place that does not change, and never has. The borders of the wood, which Nenya has maintained against the world's encroachment for nearly 5,000 years, press outward by a degree that is not large, but is unmistakable to anyone with the instruments to perceive it. The wood is larger than it was yesterday. It is more completely itself. It is more thoroughly preserved against every form of change that the outside world might bring to it. Galadriel stands at the mirror and looks at the water and does not use it. She does not need to use it. The mirror shows many things, things that were, and things that are, and things that yet may be, and she has spent nearly 5,000 years learning to read its grammar. The ambiguous grammar of a vision that does not distinguish between the past it recalls and the future it warns against, and the present it offers as a simple, unadorned fact. She already knows what is. What is Nenya operating at a magnitude she has never experienced in all that time, amplified through its resonance with the One to a degree that exceeds her direction of it. Nenya is no longer entirely hers. It is not entirely Aragorn's. It is responding to the relationship between the One and the Three, the way a satellite responds to the gravity of two bodies simultaneously, pulled by both, owned by neither, orbiting in a path determined by the interaction of forces rather than the intention of either. She looks at the mirror's still water. What she sees in it is not a vision. It is a reflection, her own face, very clear, in water that is more still than water she did not use the mirror's power to still. The water of the mirror is always still. That is its nature and its function. But this stillness is different. This is the stillness of a thing that has been held at its most still moment and cannot move from it. The surface does not register her breath. The surface does not register the slight movement of air through the glade. It is perfectly, absolutely still, and the reflection in it is perfectly, absolutely clear. And she looks at herself in water that will not move and understands, with the precision of a mind that has spent nearly 5,000 years thinking about exactly this, what has happened to her wood. Lothlorien is not being preserved, it is being perfected. The distinction is one she has always understood in theory, has argued it, in the long councils and correspondences of the Third Age, to elves who wanted to use the Three more aggressively, more expansively, who saw in Nenya a tool for restoration rather than conservation. She explained it patiently every time. Preservation maintains what is. Perfection enforces what should be, according to the judgment of whoever holds the power. The difference between them is the difference between a gardener who keeps a garden alive and a gardener who decides, from outside the garden's own processes, what the garden's perfect form is and then holds it there. She has always been a gardener who kept the garden alive. She is now in a garden that is being held. She walks through it. The morning light through the Malern leaves is the specific gold that Malern leaves produce in their autumn, and it is autumn here, and it has been autumn here for as long as Nenya has been working, and under ordinary circumstances the autumn would be a managed condition. The leaves turning, holding, eventually falling in the slow and beautiful way that Lothrien's leaves fall. The falling itself a part of the wood's aesthetic, the movement and the color and the final rest of the leaf on the forest floor, all part of what the preservation maintains. The preservation was always of the whole process, not the arrested moment. The leaf she watches is caught at the moment of separation from its branch. She sees it immediately, registers it in the first seconds of her morning walk, because it is in her direct path and it is wrong, in the precise way that someone with nearly 5,000 years of intimate knowledge of this wood's behavior can identify as wrong. The leaf is 3 feet below its branch and 3 feet above the forest floor, and it is neither falling nor attached. It simply is, at the position it occupied at the moment the ring's amplified reach through Nenya found it and held it. It is the specific gold of a Lothlorien Malern leaf in its best moment. The color does not continue. It will not continue. It has been fixed at the moment of its most perfect expression, and what that means for the leaf is that the leaf is finished, not dead, not dying, but complete, held at completion, and completion is not the same as life. She stops in front of it. She reaches out her hand toward it, slowly, the way you approach a thing you are not certain is real. Her fingers stop an inch from the leaf's surface. She does not touch it. She does not touch it because she already knows, without touching, what she would find. A texture that is not wrong, not damaged, not decayed in any way that would justify concern. A texture that is perfect. That is the problem. Leaf texture is not supposed to be perfect. Leaf texture is supposed to be the accumulated record of the leaf's own history. The variations in moisture uptake, the record of the specific light it received on specific days. The small asymmetries of a living process that is always slightly different from itself. A perfect leaf is a leaf from which the record has been removed. What remains is the ideal. And the ideal is not the thing. She lowers her hand. She walks back to Caras Galadon without completing her morning circuit, which she has not failed to complete in all the long years of her keeping of this wood. She goes to the high chamber and she sits in the chair at the window and she looks out over her wood, which is more beautiful than it has ever been, and she thinks about Aragorn. She does not blame him. This is the most important thing to understand about how she carries this, and it must be understood precisely. She does not blame him. She refused the ring herself. She told Frodo she had passed the test. She knows, with the complete self-knowledge of a being who has thought about her own nature for longer than most races of Middle-earth have existed, that if she had taken it, what she had built would have been worse, would have been the perfection she warned him of, the beauty that is terrible, the preservation that is possession. She passed the test. Aragorn failed it. The difference between their failures is one of degree, not of kind. She does not blame him. She simply sees what he has done and cannot pretend she does not see it. Because she is Galadriel, and she has never been able to pretend she does not see things, and the thing she sees is this: the man who loves her wood most, who remembers it with the clarity of a man who has spent 20 years preparing to deserve it, who held the specific quality of its autumn light as a touchstone against the darkness of everything the Third Age demanded of him. That man has fixed her wood at the moment of his memory of it. He has preserved the guest room. The guest room is exquisite. The family is still in it, and they will be in it forever, and the guest room was never designed to be a home. Elrond of Rivendell feels it differently. He feels it through Vilya, which is associated with air and with the hidden, and with the specific quality of elvish power that operates through concealment rather than presentation, and what he feels is not Nenya's amplification, not the sense of a preservation power extending beyond its intended range. What he feels is a change in direction. Vilya has maintained Rivendell for just over 3,000 years as Elrond chose to maintain it, a sanctuary of the specific kind that he values, which is the sanctuary of accumulated learning in a place of genuine safety, where the wounded can be healed, and the weary can rest, and the world's knowledge can be preserved against the entropy that has taken everything else. The valley as Elrond loves it. The valley as Elrond would choose it, if choosing were the mechanism. Choosing is no longer the mechanism. The valley Vilya is now maintaining is the valley as Aragorn remembers it. This is not the same valley. Aragorn's memory of Rivendell is the memory of a man who came there as a child and was raised in its libraries and its halls, and who carries the place as a specific, beloved, childhood-shaped image of home. It is a true memory. It is a complete and detailed and entirely genuine memory. And it is the memory of a visitor, of a man who experienced Rivendell as a refuge rather than as a project, who remembers what it felt like to be in it rather than what it took to maintain it. The valley Vilya is now maintaining does not include the specific anxieties of its maintenance. It does not include the weight of the decisions Elrond has made in its service across the long centuries of his keeping, the people turned away, the information withheld, the careful management of what is known and by whom and in what sequence. It includes the results of those decisions, but not the decisions themselves, because the results were what Aragorn saw, and the decisions were what Aragorn did not see. And the ring preserves what its bearer has witnessed, and cannot preserve what its bearer never knew was there. Elrond walks through Rivendell's halls, and they are exactly as they should be, and entirely wrong in a way he cannot point to from the outside. He goes to his library. He has been going to his library in the mornings for more than 4,000 years, and the library has always been the place where the work is, where the questions are open, and the answers are in process, and the scholarship is ongoing, and the books on the shelf are not monuments, but tools, used and reused and annotated and corrected and returned to. In the specific way of a working library where the work never stops because the questions never stop. The books are on the shelf. They are very well organized. They are in the arrangement that Elrond established 300 years ago after a comprehensive reorganization, and the arrangement is the correct arrangement, and the spines are in good condition, and the binding on the oldest volumes, which required his attention 6 months ago, a careful and time-consuming repair that he performed himself, because he trusts no one else with the oldest volumes, is in exactly the condition it was in on the morning Aragorn last visited Rivendell. The repair he has not yet done is done. The repair he will do next is also done. He stands in front of the shelf and he understands, with the complete and devastating clarity of the ring's sight operating through Vilya into his perception of his own library, that the library has been preserved at the moment it was most complete, at the moment Aragorn's memory of it is most vivid, and that most complete is not the same as most alive. The most alive version of this library was always the version that contained its own incompleteness, its own ongoing work, its own open questions with provisional answers and new questions in the margins. The margins are clean. He reaches for a book. He opens it. His own handwriting in the margins, dense, technical, the handwriting of a scholar in active engagement with a text, is there. The handwriting he added last month is there. The handwriting he was going to add next week is also there. because the ring's preservation has collapsed the distinction between what has been done and what was going to be done, finding the most complete version and holding it. There is nothing left to add. He closes the book, he returns it to the shelf. He looks at the library, his library, more than 4,000 years of his library, perfect and complete and entirely finished, and he understands that he will not open these books again, because opening them would be a gesture rather than an action, and gestures in libraries feel, to a man who has spent so many thousands of mornings doing actual work in them, obscene. He goes to the window. Outside, the valley is beautiful. It will always be beautiful. The waterfalls that give Rivendell its name fall at the rate and volume and angle that Aragorn remembers them falling, and the light on the water is the light that was in the water on the morning the Fellowship rested here, and called it beautiful, and it will be that light tomorrow, and in 10 years, and in 100. In the valley below the library window, a leaf that has been falling from the great beech at the valley's center is 3 feet below its branch and 3 feet above the ground. It is exactly the color it was when it left the branch. It is not falling anymore. Harion, son of Brethil, has tended the court of the fountain for 30 years. He did not choose this work in the way that men of ambition choose work, did not assess his options and select this one for its advantages, did not weigh it against alternatives and find it superior. He came to it the way water comes to a particular course, through the accumulated pressure of small inclinations over a long time, each one individually insufficient to constitute a direction, collectively sufficient to constitute a life. His father had worked in the lower circle's public gardens. His mother had kept, in the narrow strip of soil behind their house on the 3rd level, a kitchen garden of extraordinary productivity that required more attention than its size suggested, and received it without complaint because attention was what she had, and the garden was where it went. He was given the court of the fountain at 32 by the then current steward's household administrator, who needed someone reliable for the most symbolically significant horticultural post in Gondor, and had been watching Harion's work in the 6th Circle's terraced gardens for 2 years. The administrator described the position as an honor. Harion received it as a responsibility, which is a different thing and a more durable one. The white tree is the responsibilities center. He learned it the way you learn a thing you will spend your life with. Not quickly, not from books, though he has read everything written about the tree's lineage and botanical behavior, and the reading was useful, but through the accumulated daily practice of observation across 30 years of mornings. He knows when it is going to rain by the specific way the bark darkens in the hours before the clouds arrive. He knows the precise order in which it buds in the spring, left fork first, then the right, then the 3 branches of the crown in sequence from south to north, and the deviation from this order that occurred in the wet spring 14 years ago and has not recurred since. He knows its root system by the feel of the soil at specific points around the fountain's base, which he tests every 3 weeks with his hands rather than instruments, because instruments give you numbers and numbers give you categories, and categories are always slightly wrong about specific trees. He keeps a log. The log is a narrow leather notebook, replaced every 5 years when it fills, kept in the guard room off the eastern entrance to the court. His predecessor kept one, and his predecessors before that, a continuous record going back further than Harion has personally verified, far enough that the earliest volumes are written in a formal hand that belongs to a century of Gondorian orthography that the current school system no longer teaches. The log records seasonal behavior, leaf counts, flowering dates, root inspection results, water consumption estimates, anything that might be relevant to understanding what the tree is doing and why. It is not a scientific document in the formal sense. It is the record of a relationship. The flowering stopped in November. He noted this when it happened, or rather when the flowering that should have happened did not. The last buds of the season's final cycle, which should have opened in the first week of November and produced the small, white, improbably late flowers that the tree sometimes manages before the cold closes in, simply did not open. He noted it without alarm. The tree had skipped late-season flowering twice in his years of observation, once during the dry autumn of his 7th year in the post, once during a period of unusual warmth that confused the tree's seasonal rhythms. He recorded it, added a note about the atmospheric conditions, and moved on. December passed. The buds did not open. He noted this with slightly more attention. The buds were still present, not withered, not dropped, not showing any of the signs of failure that a bud shows when it has decided against completion. They were simply closed, exactly as they had been in October, at the season's end. He began checking them daily rather than weekly, making closer observations of their color and texture, and the specific firmness that a closed bud has when it is waiting, and the specific different firmness it has when it is not going anywhere. These felt like the former. He could not be certain. January, February, March, in the first week. On a Tuesday morning, with the specific quality of early spring light that Minas Tirith gets when the southern wind comes off the Anduin and the air has the smell of water and warming stone, Harion finds the leaf. He is doing his rounds. The court in early morning is empty of people and full of the particular quality of stillness that enclosed stone spaces have before the day's population arrives to animate them. His footsteps on the flagstones are the only sound. He is carrying his inspection tools in the canvas bag he has carried for 30 years, the probe, the moisture meter, the hand lens, the notebook in its outer pocket. He is thinking about the root inspection scheduled for next week, about whether the soil moisture on the northwest side of the fountain has recovered sufficiently from the winter's unusual dryness. The leaf is on the flagstone at the base of the tree's eastern side. He sees it from 3 paces away and stops walking, which is not his habit. His habit is to continue walking during observation, to assess things in motion rather than halting to study them, because 30 years of observation have taught him that things look different when you stand still in front of them, and the stillness is a kind of pressure that the thing responds to. He stops anyway. The leaf is wrong in a way that stops him before he has identified what is wrong about it. He crosses the remaining 3 paces and crouches. It is gray. Not the gray of dying, not the dry, curling, lightless gray of a leaf that has failed its season and been released by a tree with no further use for it. The gray is different, cooler, more even. He reaches for it with the hand he uses for assessment, the right, the more sensitive, and his fingers contact its surface and he does not pick it up immediately, because the surface requires a moment of processing. It does not flex. He applies the specific, calibrated pressure that 30 years of leaf assessment have made automatic, the pressure that tells you in the leaf's response. Whether you are dealing with a leaf in late season, early season, stress, disease, or health. The pressure that has always produced a response in the thousands of leaves he has assessed across 30 years of mornings. This leaf does not respond, not because it resists. Resistance would be a response. It simply has no give. The surface under his fingers is smooth and detailed and exactly the correct temperature for a leaf on a cool March morning, and it is rigid, with the rigidity of a material that has no architecture for flexibility, the way metal has no architecture for flexibility when you apply leaf-appropriate pressure to it. He picks it up. He holds it to the morning light, the Anduin light, the specific quality of spring light that comes off the water and illuminates things from below as much as above, giving objects a particular clarity of edge that other light does not produce. The leaf in this light is extraordinary. Every vein is present, precisely rendered. The main vein and the secondary veins and the tertiary veins, and the fine network of tertiaries between the tertiaries that in an ordinary leaf requires a hand lens to see clearly. He can see them all without the lens. The detail is complete. The detail is more complete than leaf detail is supposed to be, because leaf detail in a living leaf is the accumulated record of the leaf's own development, is always slightly asymmetrical, always slightly variable, always carrying the small imperfections of a biological process that operates under conditions that are never identical twice. This leaf is identical to itself in every part. He sits down on the flagstones. He does this without deciding to. The crouch simply becomes a sit. The way a crouch becomes a sit when the thing being examined has produced, in the examiner, a response that requires more stability than a crouch provides. He sits on the cold stone of the court of the fountain in the early morning light with a gray, rigid, botanically perfect leaf in his hand, and he looks at it for a long time. He is a gardener. He has been a gardener for 30 years. He does not have a framework for what he is holding, because the framework of gardening is the framework of process, of seeds becoming seedlings, becoming plants, becoming what they are supposed to become, and the gardener's role in that process being the provision of conditions rather than the enforcement of outcomes. He has never enforced an outcome. He has never wanted to. The point of the work, as he has always understood it, is the process. The point is the thing becoming itself. This leaf became itself and then stopped. He looks at the tree above him. The buds are still closed. They have been closed since November. They are exactly the color and the firmness they were in November. They are waiting, and the waiting has the quality of waiting that does not resolve, of a thing that has been told to wait by something larger than the instruction to grow. He takes the notebook from the canvas bag. He opens it to the current week. The previous entries are there in his careful hand: soil moisture readings, the route inspection schedule, a note about a section of flagstone near the western edge that has been shifting slightly and needs assessment before it becomes a hazard. Normal entries. The entries of a working gardener working a living garden. He picks up his pen. He writes the date. He writes, a steel leaf. He pauses. He writes, the tree has not flowered in 4 months. He pauses again. His pen is above the page. He looks at what he has written, and he looks at the leaf in his other hand, and he looks up at the tree above him, with its closed buds, and its perfect bark, and its exactly correct silhouette against the early spring sky, and he understands. In the way that people who work closely with living things understand things, through the accumulated knowledge of what living things do, from which the deviation of this living thing is absolutely legible, that something is wrong. He knows it completely. He cannot say it in a language that would be useful to anyone who asked him to explain. He puts the pen back to the page. He writes, I do not know what to write in this space. I am writing this to have something to write. He closes the notebook. He puts it in the bag. He picks up his inspection tools. He stands, and the leaf in his hand is cool and exact and weighs what a leaf weighs, and he sets it on the fountain's edge because he does not know what else to do with it, and he picks up his rake, and he goes back to work. The leaf rests on the fountain's stone edge in the morning light, gray, perfect, and entirely finished. The water in the fountain does not move. By any measure available to the governance of men, the Fourth Age of Middle-earth is the best period in its recorded history. This is not propaganda. It is not the assessment of a court historian writing under the pressure of a king who rewards flattery. It is the conclusion that an honest accountant, working from the actual numbers, would reach if asked to evaluate the condition of the realm's population against every previous period for which records exist. The numbers are not complicated. They are not ambiguous. They point in one direction with the unanimity of numbers that describe a genuine improvement in material conditions, and the direction they point is up. Hunger, eliminated, in the sense that the administrative infrastructure of the Pax Elisar, the granary system, the distribution network, the ring-amplified agricultural productivity of the realm's farmland has produced. In every year since the Fourth Age began, a surplus that exceeds the population's requirements by a margin sufficient to absorb any local failure of production. There have been local failures. A fungal condition in the barley of East Ithilien in the 7th year, a water shortage in the Pelinor's southern quarter in the 3rd year, a late frost in the Westfarthing in the 11th year that took the apple crop. Each failure has been absorbed by the system before the population it affects feels it as hunger. The margin exists for exactly this purpose, and the margin holds. Disease, not eliminated, the ring does not prevent illness in the way Galadriel's preservation field prevents it. Because Aragorn has not amplified Nenya's specific power of biological maintenance to that degree, and the healing he does is particular rather than ambient, requiring his presence and his attention and something of himself each time. But the houses of healing in Minas Tirith, under the protocols he established in the first year of the reign and has refined continuously since, operate at a standard of practice that exceeds anything available in any previous period. The training is systematic. The records are comprehensive. The outcomes improve each decade as the accumulated learning of the institution compounds. Men and women who would have died of infections that are now manageable do not die. Children who would have died of fevers that are now understood do not die. The death rate from disease in the Fourth Age is not a fraction of what it was in the Third. It is a small fraction of that fraction. War, absent. Not reduced. Not managed. Absent. The last organized military conflict within the borders of the reunited kingdom occurred in the 4th year of the reign, when a confederation of hillmen from the southern arid Nimrace attempted a series of coordinated raids on the farming settlements of the Lebanon. Aragorn rode south with a company of the Gondorian cavalry, and the response to the raids was not a counter-raid or a punitive expedition or any of the conventional military responses available to a king of Gondor dealing with border disorder. He rode to the settlement where the Hillmen's council met, and he sat with them for a day, and when he rode north again the raids had stopped and the Hillmen were sending representatives to Minas Tirith on a regular basis to discuss the land use disagreements that had been the raids' actual cause. No one was killed. No one was imprisoned. The Lebanon farmsteads were not raided again. That was 11 years ago. There has been no organized military conflict since. The roads are safe. This is a sentence that has not been true in any previous period of the Third Age's recorded history, and requires a moment of consideration. For that reason, the roads are safe. The road from Minas Tirith to Edoras, which in living memory required a mounted escort and careful timing to avoid the irregular violence of the plains, is now traveled by merchants and pilgrims and seasonal workers on foot, alone, at any hour, and the travel is unremarkable. The road from Edoras to the fords of Isen, which was once the specific anxiety of every trade agreement that depended on the Westfolds' cooperation, is a road that children use to visit grandparents in the next valley. The road from the Greenway to Bree, which the hobbits of the Shire took seriously enough to avoid after dark in the late Third Age, is now a road for commerce and visiting and the ordinary movement of ordinary people going about ordinary lives. The wardens stand in the passes. The roads are safe. This is the accounting of the Pax Elisar, and the accounting is accurate, and the accuracy is the most important thing about it. These are not the statistics of a court that inflates its achievements. They are the numbers of a realm that has genuinely been made better, that has been administered with extraordinary care and intelligence and love by a man who understood from his first morning on the throne to the 35th that governance is not a performance of power, but a provision of conditions, and that conditions matter to the people who live in them in ways that are real and specific, and not abstract. He is a great king. This must be understood clearly before anything else can be understood clearly. He is not a king who became less than he was. He is a king who became exactly what he was always built to be, and the built thing is genuinely great, and the greatness is not diminished by what the ring has added to it, and it is not enhanced, and it is not explained, and it is not excused. It simply is. The king is great. The realm is better than it has ever been. The people in it are healthier and safer and better fed than they have ever been. And something is wrong. Not wrong in the way that wrongness announces itself, not wrong in the language of cruelty or corruption or the specific, legible failures of kings who lose their way in the familiar directions. Wrong in the way that a room is wrong when something has been removed from it and you cannot identify what the something was because it was always there and you have no reference point for its absence. Wrong in the way of a world that has been made as good as it can be made by the specific vision of one man who loves it, and has therefore become. In all the ways that matter to the people who are not that man, slightly not their own. The accounting does not capture this. The accounting was never built to capture this. It captures hunger, disease, conflict, safety, longevity, productivity, justice. The categories that governance has always used to measure its own success, because these are the categories that admit of measurement. The thing that is wrong does not admit of measurement. It does not show up in the numbers. It shows up in the specific quality of a man who steals a loaf of bread he does not need, and in the specific quality of the 3 hours it takes to explain to him why the theft was unnecessary, and in what he has lost at the end of those 3 hours that the explanation does not name and the accounting does not count. The accounting continues. The surplus holds. The roads are safe. The numbers are very good. Callandor, son of Halmir, steals a loaf of bread on a Thursday morning in the 14th year of the reign. He is a chandler. He makes candles, tallow, and beeswax, both, depending on the customer's requirements and budget, in a workroom on the 4th circle that has been in his family for 3 generations. The workroom produces adequate income. Not comfortable income. The candle trade in the 4th Age is a trade of diminishing necessity, because the king's highway lamps, maintained by the city administration, are better and cheaper than private candlelight for most purposes. And the premium candle market that supports craftsmen like Callandor is narrowing as the administrative lighting expands. He is not poor by the standards of the Third Age. He is poor by the standards of the Pax Elisar, where poverty is not a statistical category but an administrative classification with specific remediation protocols attached to it, and the classification requires that his income fall below a threshold that his income, in a bad month, approaches but does not consistently cross. His daughter is sick. The sickness is not serious, a winter fever, the kind that the houses of healing deal with routinely, the kind that responds well to the willow bark preparation that the healing administration distributes from its district posts for exactly this purpose. He knows this. He has been to the district post before. The preparation is free and the post is open 6 days a week, and the staff there are kind, and none of this helps him on Thursday morning at the 6th hour, when the fever has been climbing since dawn, and his daughter is crying in a way that has moved past the crying from discomfort register and entered the crying from confusion register, which is the register that fear lives in. And fear is not a rational state, and in the irrational state that fear produces in a man whose daughter is crying in the confusion register, Callandor walks past the bakery on his way to the district post and takes a loaf of bread from the cooling rack outside the bakery door without stopping and without paying. He does not eat the bread. He is not hungry. He takes it because his hands needed to do something that felt like helping, and taking bread from a rack is something his hands could do, and his hands did it before he had finished deciding whether to. The warden who comes to his workroom 2 hours later, after the bread has been eaten and his daughter is slightly improved, and he is sitting at his bench with the cold clarity of a man who has had time to think about what he did and why, is not a soldier. He is a civic administrator in the brown coat of the welfare office. A man of middle years with the specific bearing of someone who has been doing this work long enough to have stopped finding it adversarial. He sits across from Callandor at the workbench, with the molds and the wax, and the smell of tallow between them, and he explains, with patience and with genuine warmth, that the bread was unnecessary. He explains it completely. The preparation at the district post would have been available within the hour. The post has a physician on duty on Thursdays specifically for cases of the kind Callandor's daughter represents. The administrative system exists precisely for this situation, not for situations of extreme deprivation, not for the catastrophic failures that the old world produced regularly, but for the ordinary pressures of ordinary life that ordinary people encounter, and that the king's administration has built a response infrastructure for. Callandor did not need to steal the bread. The system would have provided. The system always provides. The system was built to always provide, and it has always provided, and it will always provide, because the king's attention to the system's functioning is total and continuous, and has been for 14 years. Callandor listens. He listens for a long time, longer than the explanation requires, because the warden, who has been doing this work long enough to understand that the explanation is only part of what is needed, gives the listening space to continue until something shifts in Callandor's face that tells him the listening has become understanding rather than waiting. This takes approximately 3 hours. At the end of 3 hours, Callandor agrees. He agrees sincerely. He agrees with tears that are not the tears of a man performing remorse, but the tears of a man who has been genuinely helped, who has been shown, with patience and clarity and the specific warmth of a system that was designed from its foundations to produce this experience in this moment, that the fear was unnecessary. The world provides. The king ensures it. This is not an abstraction. It is a fact with a specific administrative infrastructure behind it, and Callandor now understands the infrastructure completely, in the way that people understand things after 3 hours of patient explanation by someone who genuinely cares whether they understand. The warden leaves. Callandor feeds his daughter the remainder of the loaf. She eats it and falls asleep. Her fever slightly lower, the way fevers are slightly lower after sleep. He watches her for a while. He is not afraid anymore. The warden's explanation removed the fear, not by addressing its cause, which was the daughter's sickness, but by demonstrating that the cause was not a threat, that the world contained the cause and had a response for it, and that Callandor's own intervention was not required because the system's intervention was sufficient. He sits with this for a long time. What he has lost he will not know for years, and will never find the language for it is not comfort. He had comfort before the theft, and has it now. What he has lost is smaller and less nameable, the faculty of believing that the world might not provide, and that this gap between the world's provision and what his daughter needed was his to close. The faculty of believing his hands were necessary. The faculty of believing that the theft, wrong, unjustifiable, a foolish thing done in a frightened moment, was also his, authored by him. The expression of a father whose love exceeded the boundaries of what was permitted. He does not steal again. He does not need to. He loves his daughter. He loves his king. He knows with a certainty that arrived 3 hours ago and has not left, that the king will provide, and the providing is real, and the candle-making income is what it is, and the district post is open 6 days a week. And this is enough, and it will always be enough. He goes to bed that night in a room where the lamp burns with the regular oil that the king's fuel administration distributes at the standard rate, and the oil is good oil and burns cleanly, and the lamp is the lamp he has had for 12 years, and his daughter breathes quietly in the next room. He sleeps well. He will sleep well tomorrow. He has nothing to worry about. He had nothing to worry about before the theft either, but before the theft, he had not yet been shown this. And the space between not knowing the system would provide and knowing the system will provide was the space in which he was, briefly, himself, afraid and acting from fear and wrong and entirely the author of his own wrongness. That space is closed now. In the gutter at the base of the bakery street's drainage channel, where the loaf rolled when Callandor took it and his hand shook, a small piece of crust, broken from the loaf in the taking. It lay there through the morning. In the afternoon, a child found it and ate it. The child thought nothing about it. The bread was good. The king's granaries produce excellent grain, and the city's bakers are well supplied, and the bread of Minas Tirith in the 14th year of the Pax Elissar is the best bread the city has ever produced. It tasted like bread. It tasted exactly like bread should taste. The child ate it and went home for supper. The supper was also very good. The supper is always very good. Sam Gamgee plants potatoes in March. He has done this every March for as long as he has had a garden to plant them in, which is his entire adult life, which has been a good life by every available measure and continues to be a good life and will continue to be a good life for as long as lives in the Shire continue, which the current arrangement suggests will be a very long time. The potatoes go in the ground in March, because March is when they go in the ground. This is not a rule he was given. It is a fact he absorbed over the course of his childhood in the same way he absorbed the other foundational facts of the Shire's gardening year, not as information but as the shape of time itself, the way time feels when it is organized by the recurring demands of things that grow. The soil at Bag End is exceptional. It has always been good soil. The hill's drainage is well suited to the root crops that the Gamgee family has grown here for 3 generations. But since the Lurien earth was incorporated in the first year after the war that did not happen, the soil has been something beyond good. The Lurien earth did what the lady said it would do. The Shire bloomed. Not metaphorically, the Shire underwent, in the years after the incorporation, a biological transformation that the farmers and gardeners and careful observers of the Westfarthing's agricultural tradition have never seen or recorded or had language for. Things grew that had not grown here before. Things that had grown here grew more fully, more richly, with a depth of color and flavor that exceeded what the same seeds had produced in the same soil and the same weather in every previous growing season. The garden at Bag End is magnificent. It has been magnificent for 14 years. It will be magnificent next year and the year after, because the soil that the Lurien earth made is the soil it made permanently. It is not a treatment that fades or requires reapplication. It is a transformation of the soil's fundamental character, and the character holds. Sam knows this. He has been watching it hold for 14 years. He tends the magnificent garden with the same attention he would bring to a garden that required his intervention to be magnificent. Because the attention is what he has and the garden is where it goes, and the habit of attending to a garden does not change because the garden has stopped needing the attending. He kneels in the garden bed. The soil under his hands is exactly right. The temperature, the moisture, the texture of a soil that is ready to receive a seed potato at this particular moment in March, in this particular year. He has felt this readiness in soil many thousands of times. He knows it completely. His hands know it without consulting him. He presses the first seed potato into the earth, and the earth receives it, and he covers it and moves to the next position and presses the second seed potato into the earth, and the earth receives it, and this continues in the methodical, unhurried way that planting continues when the planter knows exactly what he is doing and has known for 30 years and will know for as long as he plants, which will be his entire remaining life. 20 potatoes planted. 20 more to go. He sits back on his heels and looks at the row. The row is correct. The spacing is correct. The depth is correct. The soil has been prepared correctly, and the seed stock is this year's best, and the drainage of the bed is as he has maintained it, and in 9 weeks there will be potatoes here. Excellent potatoes. The best potatoes in Hobbiton, by the general agreement of everyone who has eaten a potato that came from this garden, which is most of the people in Hobbiton. He knows this. He can see it in the row. The row tells him, in the language that rows of correctly planted seed potatoes speak to people who have been planting them for 30 years, exactly what it is going to become. He cannot find what is wrong. This is the thing he returns to every morning, in the specific way that the mind returns to things it cannot resolve, not obsessively, not with the dramatic urgency of a wound that demands attention, but with the patient, recurring quality of a question that has no answer available to it. He cannot find what is wrong, because nothing is wrong. The garden is magnificent. The shire is peaceful. Rosie is well. The children are grown and settled and well and come for dinner on Sundays. He is the most respected gardener in Hobbiton. He is a good man living a good life in a good world that a good king has made good. He picks up the next seed potato. He plants it. The feeling is not sadness. He has felt sadness, has felt it at funerals, at losses, at the specific, ordinary griefs of a long and fully lived life, and sadness has a quality that this does not have. Sadness is the response to something that has been taken. What he feels is not the response to a taking. It is closer to the response of a structure that was built to bear a specific weight, which has been placed in a world where the weight does not exist. The structure is fine. The weight is not there. The structure has no way of knowing whether its own capacity for bearing was real, because the test that would have confirmed or denied it was not administered. He was supposed to carry something unbearable across an unbearable distance through an unbearable country. He tends an excellent garden in a peaceful shire. He plants the 20th potato. He has 10 more to go. He plants the 21st. The soil receives it. He plants the 22nd. In the evenings, when the light is at its best, and the garden is at the fullness of the afternoon, and there is nowhere he needs to be, he stands at the hill's western edge and faces the direction he cannot see toward. He cannot see the sea from here. The sea is very far west, and the land between is full of things, and his eyes are the eyes of a hobbit built for close observation of the things immediately around him, not for the long sightlines of men who stand on hills and look for what is over the horizon. He cannot see the sea. He stands facing it anyway. He does not know what he is listening for. He suspects he would not be able to say, if asked, why he comes here in the evenings instead of sitting in the garden he has just tended, which is by any measure a more pleasant place to spend an evening than a hill's edge with the westerly wind coming off the distant water. He would not be able to explain why the wind from that direction is different from other winds, why it carries. When it comes from the west in the evening, a quality that the wind from other directions does not carry. He would not be able to explain any of this. He stands there, and the wind comes in from the west, and something in him reaches toward it and cannot reach far enough, and he stands until the light fails. And then he goes inside. Rosie watches him from the window. She has been watching him stand there for 14 years. She does not ask. She is Rosie, which means she understands without asking, and what she understands is that there is something her husband is facing toward that she cannot see from here either, and that the facing of it is necessary to him in a way she cannot address, and that the most loving thing she can do is let him face it for as long as he needs to. He always comes in when the light fails. She always has supper ready. This is love. It is genuine and complete, and it is his life, and he knows it, and it does not change what he faces toward in the evenings, because these are two separate things, and both are true. Arwen sits in the window of the house of the king and watches the city. She has been sitting in this window on various mornings for 14 years. Not always this window. The house has many windows, and she distributes her sitting among them with the quiet variety of someone who has learned to manage the experience of a static world through the small permutations of angle and light, and which portion of the static world is visible from a given position. This window faces south. The southern view is the Pelennor fields and the Anduin beyond them, and, on clear days, the faint dark line of Amon Hen above the river's eastern bank where Faramir has built his household. On clear days, she can also see, or believe she can see, the very distant glitter of water where the Anduin bends toward the sea. She does not look at the Anduin bend on clear days. She chose mortality. She has thought about this choice every day for 14 years, which is not the same as regretting it. She does not regret it. Or rather, the structure of regret is not available to her in the way it would be available to a person who had chosen wrongly. She chose Aragorn, who is good, who is kind, who comes to her in the evenings with the specific, gentle attention of a man who carries an enormous weight and is careful, in her presence, not to put that weight down on her. She chose the city, which is beautiful. She chose the life of a queen in a city at peace, which is, by every available measure of what queens experience, an extraordinarily good life. She did not choose this. This is the thing that resists easy language. The distinction she has been working at for 14 years without arriving at a formulation that fully captures it. She chose Aragorn, and she chose mortality, and she chose Middle-earth, and what she got was all of these things, and also the world the ring has made, which she did not choose, and which her choice did not anticipate. And which is not wrong in the ways that wrong things are usually wrong. It has not hurt her. It has not taken anything she can name. It has simply become the container of her choice, and the container is not what she thought she was choosing the contents of. She chose mortality because mortality was the condition of the world she loved, because the mortal world was worth the cost of living in it. Not despite its transience, but through its transience. Because things that end have a quality that things that don't end lack, a specific quality of preciousness that is inseparable from the brevity that produces it. She chose the world that ends. The world no longer ends. It does not end in the catastrophic sense. She was not expecting catastrophe, was not in love with loss. Did not choose mortality because she wanted to suffer the losses it produces. But the quality of mortality that she was choosing when she chose it was not only the losses, it was the movement. The way the mortal world goes forward, not always well, not always toward better, but always forward. Always generating the next thing from the residue of the previous thing, always containing within it the seeds of what it has not yet become. She chose a world in motion. She sits in the window, and the city below her is in the specific motion of a world that has been optimized, that moves with the efficient purposefulness of a system that has had its inefficiencies removed, its waste reduced, its outputs standardized toward the best available version of what outputs are supposed to be. The city moves. People move through it. Commerce happens, children play, the watch changes at the gate, the lamp oil deliveries arrive on schedule, the weekly market on the second circle produces the full range of the season's best produce at prices the King's Fair Trade Administration has determined are correct. It is all in motion. It is also completely finished. The motion is the motion of a mechanism doing what it was set up to do, not the motion of a world continuing to discover what it might become. She has a window box of flowers. She planted them herself in the second year of the reign, because she wanted something of her own to tend, something whose growth was hers to support, whose requirements were hers to meet, whose condition on any given morning was a response to what she had done for it the day before. She planted them in good soil, in a good box in a south-facing window, and she watered them carefully, and they grew beautifully, and they flowered in May, and she was very glad of them. They are still flowering. It is March. The flowers are not the flowers of March. They are the flowers of May in their second year, held at the moment of their best flowering by the ambient reach of the ring's preservation as it operates through the three and radiates outward from Aragorn's presence across everything in his realm. The flowers do not know they are out of season. They do not know they should have died in November of 12 years ago. They are exactly as they were in May of the second year, and they will be exactly as they were in May of the second year indefinitely, and they are very beautiful, and they are entirely finished, and she cannot water them, because the watering would be a gesture rather than a tending, and gesture is not what she planted them for. She cannot remove them because they are perfect, and removing a perfect thing requires a reason, and she cannot find a reason that holds against the counter-argument of the perfection. She cannot stop looking at them, because looking away would be a choice. And choices in this window lately have the quality of motions in a room that is too full, they displace something, they change the arrangement. And the arrangement after the change is always still the room, still the same room, still the south-facing window above the perfect city. She looks at the flowers. They are very beautiful. They have been very beautiful for 12 years. They will always be very beautiful. She gave up the world where things end for this, and this is genuinely, completely, with no available argument against it. Beautiful. And she sits in the window with her hands in her lap and watches the flowers that she cannot water in the window that faces the Anduin bend she does not look at, while below her the city moves with the efficient purposefulness of a world that has been finished, and outside the south-facing window the morning does what it does, which has become the afternoon. And the afternoon is exactly the same quality as the morning, and the evening will be exactly the same quality as the afternoon, and she is immortal again in the specific way of something that has been preserved at its best moment. And she did not choose immortality. She chose him. He is very good. He loves her completely. He comes to her in the evenings, and he is kind. She looks at the flowers. The throne room of Minas Tirith in the 35th year of the reign is lit by the specific quality of morning light that the room was designed, 12 centuries ago, to receive. The architects who built it understood something about light that the architects of lesser rooms did not. That light in a throne room is not decoration. It is argument. The light that enters the throne room of Minas Tirith enters through windows positioned with the precision of men who had thought carefully about what a king should look like to those who came to stand before him, where the light should fall on the face of power, where the shadow should fall on the face of the supplicant, how the geometry of illumination should communicate. Before a word was spoken, the fundamental nature of the transaction taking place in this room. They built the windows to serve the argument. The argument is, this is where authority lives, and authority is illuminated, and you are standing in its light. In the 35th year of the reign, the argument has been won so completely that it no longer needs making. Aragorn, son of Arathorn, King Elisar Telcontar of the reunited kingdom of Arnor and Gondor, sits on the throne his ancestors left empty for 1,000 years, and governs, with the same diligence he brought to the first morning of the first year. This is the fact that must be held at the center of everything that follows. He has not stopped. He has not become lazy, or corrupt, or indifferent, or cruel. He heals still. The morning rounds in the houses of healing continue, daily. His hands on the wounded and the sick, with the same specific attention he brought to Faramir's fever bed in the first week of the reign, the healing costing him something each time, always, because the healing is real, and real things cost real things. He governs with wisdom and diligence and love, every day without exception for 35 years. He is a great king. This is the fact that the narrator will not soften, will not qualify, will not surround with the editorial distance of a voice that wants its audience to know it has already decided what to think. He is a great king by every definition that the long history of kings in Middle-earth has produced. He is what the lineage of Isildur was always supposed to produce, in the fullness of its potential, in the complete expression of its design. He is what Menrir was given its gifts to eventually make. He is also 35 years into wearing a piece of Sauron's soul on his finger. And the difference between those two facts is very small and very total, and the narrator will not resolve it for you, because it does not resolve. The morning light moves across the throne room floor in the slow arc of a sun that is doing what suns do, which is move. The light is the same light it was yesterday, because the light of a given hour on a given latitude in a given season does not vary significantly from year to year, and this constancy is a property of physics and not of the ring, and this is one of the very few things in the realm that is constant for a reason that has nothing to do with Aragorn's love. He looks out over the room, and he knows this room completely. He has known it for 35 years. Every stone, every joint, every place where the 12-century-old workmanship has been repaired, and by whom and in what year. He knows it the way he knows everything within the ring's reach, with the flat, total, inventory, clear clarity of a mind that has stopped discovering, because there is nothing left to discover. The narrator's eye moves through the city he built without walls. In the anteroom off the Great Hall's eastern entrance, Corendil, son of Talvor, now gray at the temples, sits at the desk where he has sat every working day for 35 years. The record book before him is the same record book. The blank page has never been filled, because the thing that should be written on it is the completion of the law, and writing the completion would make it an entry among entries, and it is not an entry among entries. It is the end of all entries. And he has never found the formula that correctly inscribes a thing that has no successors. He writes, on other pages, in careful notation, the names of visitors presented to the court, and the titles confirmed, and the ceremonies performed. He does this work well. He has always done this work well. He will do it tomorrow. The blank page is between every page he writes and the page before it, always. Because the book opened to that page and he closed it and cannot find a reason to tear it out, and the reason he cannot find is that the blank page is the most honest page in the book, and honesty is what the office was built for, and he cannot bring himself to destroy it. In the corridor of the fourth-level administrative wing, the steward's chair sits in the precise position it occupied when it was removed from the throne room 34 years ago. It has been dusted every week for 34 years. The dusting is thorough and attentive and performed by a succession of household staff who have been told it is important to keep it in good condition, which it is, because it is an excellent chair of significant historical importance, and objects of significant historical importance are maintained in good condition in the Pax Elisar as a matter of administrative principle. It has not been sat in. It is not going to be sat in. It will be dusted again on Friday, At the main gate of the city, in the cold that is not weather, the 47 stand. They have been standing here for 35 years. Their patience is not remarkable. Patience, for the dead, is not a virtue but a condition, the default state of beings who have been removed from time's normal operation and placed in something that resembles time but does not share its fundamental property of moving forward. They stand. The fruit seller whose cart was closest to the gate has moved it, over the years, to the eastern market. She does not consciously connect this to the gate. She tells people she prefers the eastern market's foot traffic. This is also true. In the court of the fountain, Hirian is on his knees beside the white tree's eastern root exposure, conducting the root inspection he schedules every 3 weeks. He conducts it with the same methodical care he has brought to it for 30 years. The roots are in perfect condition. They are always in perfect condition. He records this in the log, which has not had an interesting entry since the steel leaf in the 7th year. He keeps the log anyway, because the log is the record of the relationship, and the relationship continues even when the record has nothing new to say. On the fountain's edge, where he set it on a March morning 28 years ago, the steel leaf rests in the position he placed it. It has not moved. It is exactly the color it was. He dusts it occasionally, the way you dust something that has become part of the furniture of a place, not because it needs dusting, but because dusting is what you do with the things that belong. In the 6th circle, in a house with a good southern exposure, Arwen is in the garden. She is not sitting in the window this morning. She is outside, in the small garden behind the house that she has been tending for 20 years, because she discovered after 14 years of the window that the outside was marginally different from the inside in a way she could not fully articulate but could consistently feel, and that marginally different was enough, and you take what is enough when enough is what there is. She is planting bulbs. Bulbs are her preferred planting now. She discovered, some years ago, that bulbs offer a specific quality of deferred experience that other plantings do not. You put them in the ground in autumn, and you do not see them until spring, and the interval is not long, not by any measure available to an elf who has lived for several thousand years, but it is an interval. And the interval contains a form of not knowing that the window box flowers, preserved in their May perfection, cannot offer. She does not know exactly how the bulbs will come up. They will come up as themselves, as what the ring's ambient preservation allows bulbs in this soil in this garden at this latitude to become, but the specific. Individual expression of each bulb's emergence is not something she has seen before, and not seen before is what she has. She plants the bulbs with the focused attention of someone performing an act that matters precisely because its mattering is not guaranteed by the system around her. In the Shire, at the western edge of the hill at Bag End, Sam is not in the garden this morning. He finished the last of the spring planting yesterday, the final row, the final potato pressed into soil that received it as it receives everything, completely, without requiring anything of him, producing already in its readiness the image of what it will become. He is standing at the hill's edge in the early morning, earlier than he usually comes here. Because the light is different at this hour, the specific quality of western light before the day has fully established itself, when the sky in that direction is still the gray of something not yet decided. He faces west. The wind is not yet up. The air is very still and the Shire is very quiet, and somewhere below him a bird is beginning, tentatively, the first notes of the morning. He stands. In the city of the dead, in the pass above Dunharrow where the Dimholt road bends east, a shepherd moves his flock through in the flat gray light of early morning, faster than he needs to, not stopping at the stone where the road bends. He does not look at the sides of the road. He counts his animals by sound as he moves, the specific, familiar sound of this particular flock on this particular road, and he counts them twice, and they are all there, and he arrives at the lower pasture in the good time he always makes through the pass now, and he does not look back. The road is safe. It has always been safe, since the wardens came. He will use it again tomorrow. He uses it every time. He has never once stopped for lunch at the stone where the road bends east. He does not think about this. The morning light in the throne room reaches the ring at the 3rd hour. It comes from the eastern window at the angle the architects calculated, the angle that illuminates the hand of the figure on the throne at the 3rd hour on a morning in early spring in this latitude, which is the angle that makes the ring visible to everyone in the room who is looking at the king, which is everyone in the room, which is always everyone in the room. The ring catches the light the way it has always caught light, completely, without loss, returning it to the room in a form that is the light and also more than the light. the way the ring has always taken what it receives and returned it amplified and unchanged in quality, but increased in magnitude, which is the mechanism of domination rendered in optics. There is no inscription visible. The letters only appear in fire, and there is no fire here. There is no fire here, because fire is a form of change, and change is not required. And the king will never let the world go, and the ring will never ask him to. He is looking east. He is always looking east in the morning. The habit of the ranger, the habit of 87 years of watching the horizon for what is coming, transmuted by 35 years of kingship into the habit of a man who watches the horizon, because the horizon is his and he is responsible for it, and the responsibility is total and permanent, and he takes it completely seriously every morning with the same seriousness he took it on the first morning, because he is Aragorn, and this is what Aragorn does. The horizon is clear. It has been clear for 35 years. It will be clear tomorrow. He has made it clear, and the clarity is real, and the work it took was real. And the love behind the work is real, and the ring on his finger is warm in the morning light, with the warmth of something that has found exactly where it belongs. He will not let it go. Not because he cannot. Not because the ring compels him beyond the operation of his will. His will is as large as it has always been, larger now. Refined by 35 years of a power that does not diminish with use. He will not let it go, because letting go means releasing everything he holds, and everything he holds is the world he loves, and the love is genuine, and he cannot find, has never been able to find, has looked every morning for 35 years with the full and honest intelligence of the greatest king Middle-earth has ever produced. The argument that makes releasing what you love more correct than keeping it. He has never found this argument. He will sit on this throne, in this light, with this ring, and the horizon will be clear, and the city will be fed, and the children will be healthy, and the gate will be cold, and the steward's chair will be dusted on Fridays, and Corendil's page will be blank, and the gardener's log will have nothing new to say, and Arwen will plant bulbs in the garden, and Sam will stand on his hill in the evenings facing west, and the white tree will not flower, and the leaf on the fountain's edge will not move. And the 47 will stand in the cold that is not weather, and the ring will be warm in the morning light, and the horizon will be clear. It will always be clear. He made it so. The road goes ever on, and on, and on, and does not end, and cannot end, and the king who walks it forever, and the forever is the most sincere thing about him, and it always was. He won. He will never stop winning. That is the weight of the sovereign son.